Text, Facebook, Twitter.
Okay.
Phone is blowing up.
And webpage.
Oh, no, Devin, I like that.
Okay, it is now 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everyone. Welcome to the December regular board meeting. Our first item is minutes. It's recommended that the Board of Education adopt the minutes from the November 16th, 2022 regular meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Moved by Brian Burton.
Second.
Second by Brian Reed. Any additions, corrections, or discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So carried. All right, item number 2, superintendent's report. Mr. Ryan, you have the floor.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if you've seen the weather forecast, but it's looking promising for the end of the week, so I'm so happy to be able to see you before the holiday. Hopefully you're feeling the same. I want to, before we get started tonight, some of you had an opportunity to introduce yourselves, but I want to introduce our new interim high school principal, Mr. Jake Rowe. To my right, get an opportunity to strike up a conversation with Mr. Rowe. His quote, I think, within the first 2 weeks is, "This is by far the best school that I've been involved with." I wrote it down and
We'll give you a few more weeks.
hoping that continues to go that way. It's been surrounded by support, and as I indicated in my moment of reflection, he has engaged in sort of setting the bar of expectations for kids, which is difficult this time of year, right? We know that from certainly past practice that we've had in high school, but making some inroads already. So really happy to have Mr. Rowe with us. Yeah.
Okay.
So I want to transition tonight into what I'm calling a perspective share, right? As we transition into the new year, one of the things that I have been doing over the course of the last few weeks, right around the 12 and a half week mark, is really trying to go out and gain some perspective from our instructional staff. So I'm calling it exactly that. It's called the PLT perspective share. In a 30-minute session with one of the almost 30 PLTs, which are professional learning teams, right? For those of you that mired down in those acronyms, there's about almost 30 professional learning teams, and I'm spending time with them in about a 30-minute session to really try to level set for myself. And so, just could you click one for me? Thank you. What you know to be true, and what I certainly understand to be true in this position, is that perception and reality are two different things. However, one's perception is usually their reality, right? And so I'm spending time trying to engage in what I'm calling a perspective share, allowing me, professional learning teams are allowing me to visit them and to say to them 3 major things. The first is, are you clear? Is there clarity around the district goals? The second piece is, are you clear on the supports, the intentional supports that are in place for achievement of our district goals? And the third is, when we talk about those things that are new in district, am I well versed in those, right? So again, from my perspective, I am, but I want to know from their perspective, which is, again, sometimes very different, even though we are charged with really the common goal of improving learning outcomes for kids. Sometimes the experience for our staff is different. And so it has been interesting so far in these conversations and very beneficial for me. I'll say it again, the 30 minutes is not enough time to engage in a lot of two-way dialogue. What I'm doing after my meeting with them is I immediately send them a link to a thought exchange. And so I want to review for you opportunities for where we as a leadership team are collecting feedback from our staff regarding that, and just kind of run you through what I'm calling the perspective share. Yes. So before we dive in, one of the things that I want to be really clear about is continuing to come back to our mission and vision, right? Everything about our work in our professional learning community as a school district is focused on aspiring to be that model organization, right? That is focused on collaboration, continuous improvement, right? And effectively communicating. I said this morning in a meeting that Brian and I were at, right? I don't know a single school district that is championed for their effective communication, especially over the course of the last 2 years, right? It is one of the areas that we are criticized the most in, despite all of our efforts collectively, right? But I really understand the why behind that. I can tell you why, right? Some of the barriers are in place that prevent effective communication, certainly from the perspective of our stakeholders, right? Our parents, our community. But I continue to come back to this, and I really try to impress upon our staff this concept or belief system known as collective efficacy. This is not the first time you have heard that term, but again, that belief system that we as individuals within the organization are those vehicles for student success. We are those agents of change for those students. Every single student at Norwood City School District, regardless of the obstacles or the challenges or the barriers that they bring to the table, regardless of the hardships they experience, we are the difference makers in their life. Again, that's what collective efficacy is. Doesn't necessarily live in that realm of decision making, but rather a belief system to say, I can impact change. The two values that I want to focus in on, again, for this presentation, really conversation with you, is number 5 and 6, promoting that unrelenting focus on meeting the needs of every student. That again is that, is encompassed within that belief system of collective advocacy. And that last piece, which is encouraging that flexible thinking and risk taking, asking teachers to really think differently about their craft, right? Really trying to rid the organization of that phrase, this is the way I've always done it. We have some very trying times in front of us right now, right? And so really trying to establish that environment that allows them to do that. Certainly a safe place to do that. So just as a review, our 3 major goals, right? Through a campaign of connection and engagement, our goal is to reduce chronic absenteeism. Our ultimate goal as an academic institution, of course, is to increase student outcomes, right? In the areas of both academic and social emotional growth. And then our last is really strengthening the work of that professional learning community, which is really that structure that supports our work for our instructional staff. So the questions that I pose once again is, are you aware of district goals? Right. The good news is I'm about 10 PLTs in. Every single PLT has been absolutely, we're 100% crystal clear on this, right? The second piece is once district goals are established, each building establishes strategic plans or drafts strategic plans collaboratively that parallel district goals. The third piece is really understanding what those intentional district-wide supports are, just intended to support those instructional staff members, right, to be able to achieve our district goals. And then what's their role, right? Getting really granular with it. What's your role, and how do we better clarify for you what your role is within the organization? So we're about almost 15 weeks in right now, and I can tell you we aren't where we want to be with any of this in terms of clarity, but certainly we're going to move in that direction. So let me just sort of lay out a timeline for you. I should finish up round 1 at the end of January. At the end of January, I will have themes established throughout all of our professional learning teams, which will then help us to inform decisions moving forward. I'll be sharing all of those themes with each professional learning team, which means each instructional staff member will have access to that, to exactly what they said. And then between the end of January and June, we'll do it again at the end of the school year. Okay, and our objective, of course, is growth. Right? Thanks, Jess. So I want to review for you some of those supports that we have in place. In that professional learning community, we have identified PLC partners. We're at about a 2.5 FTE with those PLC partners. Those are intended as direct instructional supports. They will come to the individual teacher and provide instructional support within the classroom, right? In the middle of a lesson, to start a lesson, to end a lesson, whatever it is, they will provide that direct support. Okay, additionally, we are engaged in something called pop-ups. Pop-ups are about 2 to 3 hour sessions where we're pulling half of a grade level out at the same time to co-labor together around the 4 major questions within that professional learning community. At a time when we don't have substitutes, let me back up, or we have minimal substitutes, we don't have enough substitutes, right? This is a very difficult task right now to try to pull this off with consistency. But again, what we're really saying is we are investing in that professional learning opportunity when we don't have a structure outside of these pop-ups to do that. Okay, that's one of the most important pieces that I want to emphasize. During the course of the school day, when students are in attendance, we do not have an intentional structure to provide opportunities for professional learning. That is problematic more than ever today, right? Because of the diversity of needs that we see every single day. Okay. So again, at about a 2.5 FTE in that, seeing great success at the elementary level, looking to transition some of that work to the secondary level as well. You certainly have heard the acronym MTSS. Brian Reed, hit me with it. What is it?
Multi-tiered system of supports.
I like it. You are, I think 3 for 3 on that one.
I think the whole
So
thing.
you have ×2 up there because what we really try to do is differentiate that need. And we've established a coordinator at the K-5 level and a coordinator at the 6-12 level. Really thinking about questions 3 and 4 within our professional learning communities, which is really, how do we provide intervention? What's the intervention that is needed? What are we doing to extend and or so we're just mediate, thank you. The
Or
needs
intervene.
of our students, right? That's the big piece that I think is what I would characterize as a weakness right now of ours. Again, not to a fault of our instructional staff, the weakness to say we're really good at collecting the data piece of this, right? To say, here's how our students are doing. The next piece of that is, the next question we have to ask is, now what? Right? And having a structure to support the now what. That's the piece where I think we're falling short right now. We're really going to zoom in on the second half of the school year. As you know, we have invested in almost 40 new professionals in this organization this year alone, right? At a time when recruitment and retainment and staff is at a premium, we are investing in what we're calling New Professionals Academy, which is almost 1 time a month where these new professionals get together. We're encouraging them to bring their mentors with them. And we gather them off-site most of the time. Jess is doing a great job with this to really put them in the same room with those people that can, sort of look each other in the eye and say, hey, you feeling the way that I'm feeling right now? Right? Whether it's that first year as an educator or first year within the organization, right? There's a lot of sometimes confusion just around operations alone. And then really talking about some of the efforts and initiatives within the organization as well during that time. We look at that as a retainment strategy for those new professionals. One of the things we really want is for them to feel us investing in them and us as a direct support to them. Any questions so far? Great. A couple other pieces that I point to. Up in the right-hand corner, as you see LEAF. Here's a stat for you. Out of 9 administrative leaders in district, we have a single tenured administrator. Now, I don't point to tenure as the holy grail, but rather I point to it to say experience, right? Experience at Norwich City School District, facing the challenges that we are facing every single day. So as a result, what we've done is we've invested in coaches for each one of our administrators, a minimum of 2 hours per month with retired superintendents, 35+ year veterans that have just about seen everything, right, throughout their entire career. What each of those coaches, by the way, says is we thought we saw everything until pandemic. So having that person that's non-evaluative in their life to be able to seek counsel from has been an incredible benefit to each one of those administrators. I also have 4 hours a month of coaching from a current sitting superintendent as well as a retired superintendent. Again, it allows me opportunity to seek affirmation in some of my thinking and also brainstorm some of the sort of rough road, right, that is ahead of us, certainly existing as well. So I offer that to you to say, we are modeling what we want with our teachers, right? If we're saying professional learning community is new to all of us should be invested in continuous improvement in professional learning, and we are. Okay? Any thoughts on that? Good. The next piece I'll share with you is when it comes to the use of technology, right? Here's what we know. We've got about 180 instructional staff members in the district. All of them are at varying points in their personal and professional lives with how successful they feel or proficient they feel with using technology to enhance learning in the classroom. We have invested in a service through BT BOCES known as the PLIX, stands for the, and it's really the equivalent to 2 FTE, right? It's really an a la carte option. Teachers or these professionals will come directly to the teacher to provide direct support within the classroom or in small group, where they'll meet with an entire grade band or subject area to be able to say, here's how you might consider using technology to improve learning outcomes within the classroom or to increase engagement in the classroom. So that it's not just simply a device sitting in front of a student where they're looking at a secondary screen, right? Again, is that where we want it? No. The reason is because we have 180 instructional staff members, right, with varying degrees of proficiency. And so how do we support that? We support that at their level, their individual entry point, and continue to say, how will we grow in this area? Questions on that? Great, in the bottom left-hand corner, it says Ed Growth Consulting. We have worked to truly empower our professional learning team leaders this year. We have, again, almost 30, right, exceeding over $100,000 in investment of stipends for those leads, in an effort to empower their leadership within their grade level bands or subject areas. We allow them every other Friday with a sitting superintendent who's in year 7 of a professional learning community implementation. And right now, up until this point, it has been really about, again, providing opportunity for them to seek affirmation of their thinking or to help navigate some of that rocky road of maybe individual team members that aren't subscribing to some of the work that's occurring within the professional learning teams and or district initiative around professional learning teams. So again, trying to provide them a non-evaluative support, someone who's been in the trenches before and can talk them through some of that work. I'm gonna say something. Mike, you want me to speed up? All right. Couple other things. New York State, in its infinite wisdom, continues to say, here are mandates, right? You have a certain timeline to implement these certain mandates. One of those is in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusivity. Our response to that was to say, our teachers can't take on one more initiative, if you will, as an entire district. And so we've looked to create early adopters within the district, teachers saying, I'm ready. So we have almost 30 individual teachers that have subscribed to be early adopters in the area of DEI. Our approach is through the lens of universal design for learning. We started that work with both Katie Novak and Mirko Chardon, who are pictured on the screen up there, and really working directly with our leadership team as well as those early adopters to really think about how we offer more voice and choice in the classroom and focused on lesson design. And last but not least, Brian wants me to speed up. Human resources, right? To my right, I'm not going to talk about ROF particularly, but human resources in general. An organization of 350 people. Within that organization, there is an incredible diverse amount of need that exists. For the first time, we have almost double-digit non-certificated staff in district. One of the major functions of HR right now is ensuring that we are moving these educators towards certification. One of the primary roles that ROF is playing right now for all of our staff, not just instructional, is really being that liaison to New York State Ed to ensure that we are gaining certification, or at least on track to gain certification for those professionals. Again, valuing them, investing in them, and looking to retain them where appropriate. The next piece that I'll share with you is I have charged the entire leadership team with really thinking through what we call new in district and really clarifying the new order of business, if you will, within our new mission and vision. Okay, and I think this is sometimes where that perception and reality piece really kicks in for our instruction staff. So I want to share some highlights for you. This is the conversation I'm having with staff. When I think of the new in district this year, these are the things that I identify as new. In the top left, for the first time in pre-K through 8, we have an explicit science curriculum for all students. Again, that's new, especially pre-K through 5. Additionally, we have coding, an opportunity for kids K through 8 in the area of coding. We have social and emotional screeners that we're using, right? We're administering on a regular basis, at least minimum of 3 times a year. And then again, that's one of those areas that I would tell you, we have to focus our efforts on now what, right? We have the information, we know what our students are telling us. We have to have a structure that supports the now what, and we lack that specifically at the secondary level right now. Another areas that I would characterize as new in district is how we provide intervention for reading. Here's what we know, post-pandemic, we're going to see significant deficits in literacy, right? This was predicted by just about everybody in education. We're going to see a significant increase in referrals for speech and language therapy. Yeah, when you wear masks for 2 years, your first 2 years of your educational experience, your ability to articulate may be compromised, right? So in an effort to really plan for that, we are pushing our speech pathologists into the classroom, providing a proactive approach. We're also saying, instead of relying on 3 to 4 reading interventionists, every single one of our tier 1 educators, right? Every single teacher K through 5 is an interventionist and has the skills to do that. So we're providing professional learning for all of them to be able to provide that level of intervention. Again, are we where we want to be at the end of the year right now? Of course not, right? This is part of that growth train. A couple of the major areas that I'll focus on is that reading and writing project, right? Through Teachers College in Columbia, we've had many of our staff trained in this. Last year, we focused on writing. This year, we're focusing on reading. And again, that's new curriculum that supports the work that our teachers are doing with that workshop model. The last piece, and you've heard this already, we have a designation right now with New York State. It's not this isn't a number that we write home to our moms about, right? But 42%, 2020 data, 42% of our students with disabilities are graduating. Now, go back to 2020. Something big happened in 2020. Do you remember what that was? Sure. So the pandemic, of course, disenfranchised an already disenfranchised population for students with disabilities. And as a result, we had 42% graduate that year. We've already put things in place since 2020 to improve that outcome, but certainly an area that we have to improve is how many students with disabilities are graduating. Ideally, we want to be at 100%. We have to write a corrective action plan with New York State right now to address that statistic. Second piece of that is we are designated or soon to be designated potentially next year for slightly disproportionate removal of students for suspension of white students. Okay, so when we drilled down in that 2020 data, that was about 17 students that were identified, and of those 17 students, just about 10 of those students were out of district placement students. So again, we believe we already have taken steps in that, we know we've already taken steps to improve that area, but we're writing a corrective action plan for that as well. Heard me talk about the lack of vacancy at special program throughout the entire region. In ONC, BT, and DCMO BOCES, there are 0 programs available right now. The no vacancy light is flashing. What does that mean in an environment when we say all means all? That means we have to create programming for those students. So we have new programming for restrictive type environments under the umbrella of special programs in each of our buildings. Right? This has a significant ripple effect on the culture of the school district. For example, at Perry Brown, when we go into a holding place because we have to restrain a child and escort that restrained child from one area of the building to a calming room on the other end of the building, that has a significant ripple effect, right? In terms of, the gen ed setting isn't used to seeing that type of environment. Applied behavioral analysis is a type of therapy, right, that they're not used to seeing. And so we're seeing some of the effect of that right now, specifically in our middle school. Some of these students that have not been in a gen ed setting before and now are in a gen ed setting because we're saying they're our kids. And we have the greatest ability to improve or change that trajectory for that child. So the area of special programs is dead center for a reason, because this is an area that will be topic of conversation as we move forward for years to come. Questions on any of that?
I have a couple.
Please.
No, I don't feel worse.
I just because you just said it, it peaked. This was not, I've got a different question on training, but the ABA you mentioned, so we have ABA intermingled with non-ABA students, presumably. That seems challenging. Is it going okay? I don't even know what the right question is, but I know a fair amount about that. It seems like that's a really challenging thing to do.
Yeah, so when you say intermingle, right, there are
Yeah, I know that's the wrong word.
very few students in more restrictive type settings that are receiving ABA. We have clinicians that are pushing into those environments and working directly with them, right?
That's it.
So it's
Okay.
not a
Got
universal approach within a classroom that has gen ed and special ed students.
it. Okay, understand.
Makes sense?
That makes sense.
Our Grasshopper program, of course, is focused on the ABA.
Yeah, right.
All students that enroll, that are Medicaid eligible, receive that ABA.
That makes more sense. Yeah, you centered me. The training, so my training question, how much or do you do, you're talking a lot about training and coaching. And how much is a push, meaning we're saying, hey, all administrators will be coached, et cetera, versus a pull, a teacher and administrator raising their hand and saying, can I get? You know, is there a mix of both? Does it happen that way? If I'm a teacher in Perry Brown and I really want more, can I ask for it and pull in that way as well?
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of this. The design of this right now is that they're available for as much as you want, right? In the pop-ups, it's mandatory. You have to go, right?
Yeah.
You co-laboring together as a team.
Sure.
But individually, you can have, that Plix service, as we talked about, tech specialists coming in. You can have any of our PLC partners coming in to see you, right? So there's a huge option of supports for you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I do have a question about the reading intervention, you know, that's near and dear to my heart. Of course, that was a big part of my career. You said the classroom teachers are receiving more training so that they're able to handle those tier 2 and 3 students now.
Yes.
What kinds of training are they receiving?
I'll let Jess speak to that.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, ideally, right, when you think about tier 1, we want to reach about 80% of our students in tier 1. So our training has to start there. When we talk about reading and writing project, that is a new reading curriculum. We actually just rolled that out for K2 right now. It's really amazing. So that's where our training is starting, is first just really understanding how kids progress through learning how to read. And then for tier 2, we are training our teachers, some of them, in leveled literacy intervention. So what is happening at our data meetings is we're saying, okay, is a student having a phonetic issue, or is a student really having a comprehension fluency issue? And based on the data conversations, then we're saying, okay, if it's a comprehension issue, leveled literacy intervention would be the right approach. If it's a phonetic issue, then Wharton Gillingham would be the right approach for that student. So everyone is getting a different type of training beyond tier 1 so that they can support students differently. So to me, that it's really truly a response to intervention versus just saying it's one way for everybody. We know that learning how to read is very dynamic, and students respond to different types of intervention differently. The key here is that, you don't go to spend the rest of your life in intervention, which is
Right.
always the way the model used to be.
Right.
It should be every 6 weeks, we're coming back to the table and saying, is what we're doing working? If not, we need to pivot.
So the LLI program is pretty meaty. I've taught that before. And it takes a lot of training. That's a lot for all classroom teachers to have.
Yeah, so not all are getting it. It's just specific teachers.
Okay. And what about meeting the goals for IEPs? Because as a reading specialist time would count towards those IEP goals, where a regular education certified teacher would not count for those hours. So is that working out okay as far as?
Yep, because we're also including special educators in the training. So it's truly all means all. Special educators might work with general education students in a group and also with students with special needs as well. Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions? The last piece we'll drill home for you right now is that we've tasked our leadership team, really thinking about how do we evaluate, how we communicate, how we sure that we are clarifying roles and responsibilities of each member of the organization, instruction staff. But again, after I'm at the conclusion of these PLT perspective meetings that I'm having, I'm offering opportunity for a thought exchange and look forward to being able to share that information with you guys as well. Great, thank you.
Okay,
We're gonna transition to another presentation. Brian, stop watching the clock.
Go ahead and start while I
Switcher.
can.
I'll kick us off. So we thought it would be a good time to revisit the capital projects. I know the finance committee, capital projects subcommittee has seen some of this information. We thought it'd be a good time for the wider board to be kind of looped into what's been happening. So there's been a lot of work in terms of former projects, current projects, and then planning for future projects that we really want to bring everybody up to speed on. I have the slides right here, so I can.
Why don't you go ahead and start and I'll pop it up.
So first couple slides, really it's bringing back to the mission and vision. Everything we're doing with capital projects is focused back on that mission and vision statement. And really, when I say that, it's, you can't really do all these great things that Scott and Jess are talking about without talking about facilities we're doing that work in, right? So we have to focus financial resources, our time and effort on making sure the buildings are up to par and ready to prepare students for the future. So that also calls to that model organization piece. I love that in our vision statement. Really, when people come here, we want them to think that, hey, I want our district to look, feel like Norwich's. So that's in the back of our minds as we're about to present, as we present this information, that's what's driving this work.
There it is.
Thank you, Jess.
Slide 3.
I'll get there. I just need to share the screen.
Slide 3 is simply just a place slide. So we frame for staff investments in people, program, and place. So obviously we're focusing on place with this presentation. And really it's just a word cloud of the various investments we've made over the course of the past few years. You'll see security as a primary focus. And you can read through the list. Student furniture was a huge item we invested in this upcoming year, which I think has worked out great. Jess, you want to go to the next slide? So really, this slide summarizes everything I was just trying to talk about, really. So it's past projects, present projects, and future. So a little hard to see, but the projects that have completed, the Smart Schools project and the capital outlay from 21-22, different funding sources, the same outcome. It was focused on security and wiring. Right, so you think the door locks, the IP clocks, that's what that went towards. And obviously we had the water main that went down at Gibson back in, I think it was 2020. So that was an emergency project. Yeah, just we kicked off the year. In terms of current projects, again, if you combine those first two bullets, the capital outlay and the transfer capital, that $335,000 is designed to finish up a lot of that security work we started with Smart Schools. So again, it's the clocks, it's the wiring to get the other doors with the wireless access, all that good stuff to shore up our buildings. And then again, ironically, another emergency project to fix the boilers in the high school. We'll talk about that more in a minute. And then, for future projects, this is what's coming down the pipeline very soon. So you have phase 1 of that $35 million project we voted on in November of 2021. Again, we'll have more details in a minute. You've got that dovetailed with the federal stimulus funds. We allocated just over $2 million to kind of supplement that phase 1 project. And then we have phase 2, which we'll finish out with this presentation. So in terms of the current projects, these are the timelines. So the boiler project is very close to being done. We should be submitting that final cost report at the end of January, maybe February. I believe it's an air handling unit. That's the last piece of that, some commissioning, and then some control of the work. And then you can see down bottom left, those are the brand new Unilux boilers that are sitting over in the high school. So we shouldn't have to be revisiting those the next 30 years, and that will be retired by then.
I know I will.
You can go back. So 22-23, the outlay and the transfer capital, that work should be done probably March timeframe. Should be submitting final cost reports March, possibly into April. And again, all it is that middle picture and the picture on the right, that's what's being installed.
So just so you know, that's not just a clock. Right? When we go into a lockdown, right, that is communicating throughout in every single school. There, you know, I don't know, 60 of them at least in each building.
So in terms of timeline for the future projects, you can see the 35 million phase one. You're gonna approve, hopefully approve contracts tonight for the site work, and some of the mechanical work. That work is gonna begin, and I'll talk to both bullet 1 and 2, because they're gonna happen together simultaneously. Starting in May or June, that's when that work is kicking off. So you can see the little star down below, where it says buildings will be inaccessible for summer 2023. It's really important to know because every building is having site work done, and our middle school, high school is having significant work done on the roofs, as are actually the other two buildings. So that work will start this summer, hopefully concluding in October of 23, and then we should be closing both of those projects out in December of 23. The 23-24 capital outlay project, scoping is in progress. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, what that means, but again, that project will be done June 30th of 24. And then later in this presentation, we'll talk about what phase 2 is starting to look like for the larger $35 million project. So, yeah, as a visual reminder of what that means. Yeah, so top 3 pictures are really focusing on the roofs and the equipment, HVAC equipment that goes on the roofs. Much of it past its useful life, which is why most of the project is going towards shoring that up. Right, makes sense to get the roofs in order so we can protect all the assets the district has underneath those roofs. And then down below each building, the high school is not shown there, but on the left you have Perry Brown, on the right you have Stanford Gibson. That site work will be going on this summer to reconfigure the traffic flows.
Right, the huge motivation behind that is separate buses from parent and drop off and pick up. Right, that's a huge win for the district.
It should help
And for residents.
Yeah, exactly. And cut down on hopefully time kids around buses.
Sorry, there's someone at my door. I was trying to see what this- I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought myself.
Yeah, so when we first took this out to vote, right, you guys voted on educational space renovation as well. Out of that $35 million, about half of that was going to be dedicated towards educational space renovation. These are just simple renderings of 4 different locations throughout the organization, right, that were focus areas for us. We called them our common spaces, our library media center, for example. The top left is the high school library media center, just a simple rendering to really start to get an idea of what a more collaborative space would look like, right? Those of you that have been in the middle school multi-purpose room, you've seen that hideous gray accordion style door that separates that. We call it the lost space. It's a lost and found. Like if you walk in there, literally, if your children have lost clothing, I promise you it's there. Right? It's just it's a catch-all. So really thinking about how do we open that space up very differently, and then we're thinking through that space differently and potentially doing an area for to displace some of the lunch area. Remember that in the middle school, students primarily on the gymnasium floor. Okay, so not ideal. Whoever went away from the cafeteria a long time ago in the middle school, I wish we could have a conversation today. So we have separated, since then, we've almost partitioned the music room, and we've created space for at least, I think it's 60 students to eat lunch in there. Is that right, Terry?
No, quite that many either, maybe about 45 at the max.
So again, really thinking about what that looks like moving forward. Focus though on the right, Perry Brown and Stanford Gibson. Those are their library media spaces, again, showing renderings of how do we take existing space and really turn it into more collaborative space, more 21st century skill driven, if you will. So that's the piece. Next slide, Jess. That's the piece where we're going to push pause on. Since then, we've gotten smarter, and I think things have become a little less fast-paced because of the pandemic. And we realized there are some other needs that we have to tend to first. And so we're going to talk about what those are.
So the next handful of slides are actual pictures of the facility that we've, as Scott said, been here for now 3 years. We've kind of come to our attention that need to be addressed now. So just go back a couple for a second. So that, obviously the track, you can see those holes there, especially in the middle picture going straight up the lane. You can kind of see those cracks that are there. I think what that's gonna look like in the spring after the water ice have gotten in, expanded and increased the size of the cracks. Now, when you go to, they come to test to see if they can patch, they start pulling. You start pulling that whole thing's gonna go. So point of that is this track really needs to be resurfaced entirely.
We have officials right now saying that don't plan on any track meets at home this year, as is right now.
Now go inside the track. These are pictures from the turf, starting on the left, that's an actual tear. If you look at the two pictures that are the lines, the three pictures that are the lines, it's hard to see from the picture, but those are indented. Meaning it's concave, right? So kids, when they run on that is a serious injury waiting to happen, right? That's
2007 was the install date for this.
With a 10-year life typically tops, right?
12-inch stretch.
12
Yeah.
to stretch.
So this is not actually our field, but I witnessed an event just like this. I think.
I have a video of this happening. It was the middle of the soccer game, man.
Yeah, beautiful day outside, one of those beautiful summer days, and all of a sudden, the sky starts loose and a torrential downpour and a tumor, right, erupted from, I think it was around the 40-yard line, if I remember, Ryan.
It was, yeah.
And so we have significant drainage issues, right? And you're gonna see why we have significant drainage issues as we move forward in this presentation. These are something that we believe cannot be resolved.
So now you're looking, thank you, Jim Mucha, for taking these pictures for us, but this is what our storage currently looks like down around that facility. Right
This is
now,
what our away teams and our home teams, right? This is the only space we have available for them when they visit our stadium.
look at that, there's bathroom facilities in those complexes.
That's right off the baseball field, storage facility that looks as though it should be condemned, those of you who've been down by there.
So hard to see, but these are the FEMA floodplains. So on the left is more showing you the district with the floodplain. I think you want to focus more on the right where that red circle is.
This is our stadium. I don't know if you can see it from back there, right? You can see our stadium. Draw your attention to this line right here, right? That runs directly through the center of the field, almost a 50-yard line, right? So this is the floodway, the floodplain. You can build in a floodplain, you can't build in a floodway. How the DEC ever allowed, right, that field to be built where it is right now, I can't answer that question. If it was new construction, our architect said it would never be able to be built where it is right now. We think it's because the field has always existed there. So when they brought the turf concept, that's why they were able to continue with that site.
I'm gonna say that was actually built before the floodplain went that high.
Possibly.
They
It was
just
installed in
rebuilt that
2006 is the last major flood where we had water all the way up to the field.
2011.
It wasn't all the way up to the school though. 2006 was what they're calling the 100-year flood.
2011 was the fire.
I don't remember that as vividly, Brian, as you do, but again, talking with, our architects and stuff, these are the two lines that are really distinct when thinking about, facilities. And so just wanted to draw your attention to that.
Okay, so that brings us to why we're having this conversation tonight is we really want to rethink phase 2 of the project because there's just a lot of issues that need to be addressed. They need to be addressed now. On the left is what you see, just the Google Earth image of the current setup at the district. Not sure how recent that is, but you got the gist. And now over on the right is a rendering of what we could be doing in phase 2, what we're calling phase 2B of the project. Sure. Jess, want to go to the next slide?
Yeah. So take just a second to kind of soak it in, orient yourself. Right, all the way over to the left, right, that's the middle school, high school. In the center is the pool, right? To again, try to orient yourself to this area right here. This is the pool. Sorry.
You're okay. You need to be there.
So the ones on the bottom right, are those intended to be from a baseball, softball standpoint, you got baseball up there. Is it baseball, softball, softball? Is that the idea? Okay.
Again, thinking about why continue to pour dollars in rehabbing this when we're in the floodway? Right? If we're gonna continue to have significant drainage issues. And so really thinking about what would it entail to bring that facility closer, which would then really think about how we involve our school community differently in that venue. So one of the things that Brian didn't talk about, and I thought we had a couple pictures in there, is every one of those tennis courts has to be remilled. Every single one, right? There are 3 of them that were unusable this past year because of the craters and the cracks that are in them. So we have to basically start from scratch anyway with those. The entire track has to be replaced, the turf has to be replaced. So ideally, what we want to do is keep this and simply maintain it. Right? Get it to a maintenance level where we can keep it operational as potentially a practice facility and transition that multi-purpose field here. Right behind the pool. And I think one of the interesting things about this is you saw what those locker rooms look like down at the facility. What this would do is it would allow access to both pool locker rooms for any home and away team. Additionally, right down those 2 hallways, natural hallways, you have another set of locker rooms off the gymnasium. Right? You have bathroom access for our guests. As soon as you start thinking about, like, if we were down here, those of you that have ever been inside the field house, right? Really what I'd love to do is just grab a bulldozer and get rid of it all, right? None of that is aidable. Okay, because it's so far off campus. What we want to do is bring concessions back and think about tapping into some unused classroom space on the backside of the building so that we can generate aid off of that as well. It impacts what's called our max cost allowance also. So again, to orient you a little bit, right? Think about your parking right now. Baseball parking lot, as we call it, redoing most of that. You have your middle school parking out back, redoing that. That's where our buses come in right now. Softball fields. As of right now, we're talking about both varsity softball and varsity baseball, the potential of doing turf infields. Again, trying to reduce the amount of manual labor that's required to maintain those fields and get them ready for a season that's pretty small anyway, right? And so we're spending an awful lot of man hours trying to ready those fields. So at least it's about a $300,000 difference to do turf on the infields. This is your JV field with your primary soccer field, your secondary soccer field, and then potentially a modified. That's where the modified played this year. Okay, so really thinking about dual purpose. This field would be for our marching band, right? Again, a multi-purpose, but their own designated space. This would also be lighted. An 8-lane track that we could host events. You've seen a few emails that I've sent you of when you host a sectional or major regional event, the impact that has on economic and tourism in the city of Norwich. The cross-country sectional event this past year, there were almost 4,000 teams or players rather that convened in one area, and with them, of course, are their families, right? So significant impact to the community as well. We'd love to be that regional host. And again, thinking about geographically where we are, there isn't anybody that would have something like this other than maybe a Sydney. Okay. So we're going to talk about the spending plan associated with that.
Well,
Right,
there's a
for
couple other
phase
things
2.
too. Well, everywhere around the campus now would be sidewalks, right? And not to mention connecting all the way through so emergency vehicles can get all the way around the campus. You also have bleachers here with storage, bleachers here with storage, and now you have access to store under here and here. Right, so you saw some of the storage issues we had or we showed earlier, that would be resolved with all of that. And then not to mention the lighting that would provide safer access for students right now. I believe the band students are going a very long route down
Pushing their equipment.
Marconi Ave, is that Marconi Ave, right?
Yep.
Now there's walkways that would be lighted all the way to wherever they would need to go, right?
So a lot to take in, right? In that. In addition, within our phase 2 We have a significant educational space renovation for the middle school, high school STEAM lab. So really taking the most southern portion of the high school, right? When you walk into the gym entrance, think everything to the right. So what we know is the art rooms, the tech rooms, existing where the care program is, right? Becoming state of the art, right, in that area to really think about who are our future engineers, right? Who are our future manufacturers? All of that type of work would exist there. As we look to bring on agriculture next year, potential of putting something like a hydroponics lab in that area as well. So again, a lot of pushing pause at Gibson and Brown for a very short period of time and investing really on this side of the tracks in the middle school, high school, and the entire athletic complex.
Just to add to that too, Jess, if you want to go back real quick. A lot of that is related to, I think we're all going to see this summer how difficult it is to manage projects on every single campus at the same time. So part of what we want to do is, again, push pause at the other two buildings to give us time to focus. That doesn't mean we forget about them. We still have the capital outlays that can potentially devote to each of those buildings over the next 2 years while this work goes.
Right, and the potential for capital outlay projects to grow in size, like dollar wise. Availability, we're talking about raising that number to what, 250, right?
250.
Instead of 100,000, so it allows us to do that.
Okay, so in terms of timeline for phase 2, both of these projects, 2A and 2B, would run simultaneous together. So you can see on the left, design is happening right now. We're reconvening on January 4th to revisit that ed space planning at middle school and high school.
By the way, which will involve staff, students, right, and some private business as well. People that are in the industry, we're going to be visiting some of these STEAM labs that are throughout New York State, in some of our, what I'll call our rival schools.
So our goal is to hit the bidding window in fall of 23 for both of these. It's a little aggressive, but we can probably do it. What's difficult right now is getting projects through SCP, so their stimulus funds provided access, like we're doing to do capital project work. They're prioritizing that work because it hasn't been data. So it makes getting regular projects through the review a little harder. Again, we still think we can get there and hit that bid in fall of 23, which would then allow us to turn around and get started on these projects in the summer of 24. Okay. These would have to be phased, of course, that's a lot of work to do. So it'd probably take 2 cycles to get it done in. So we'd be looking to close them out in December of 25, submitting final cost reports in December of 25. Go over to the right side where it says phase 2B, the multi-purpose facility. The only wrinkle in doing that work is that because we would be changing scope from what we originally got approved by voters in fall of 21, we would have to go back out, get voter approval again. And because we'd be funding the majority of it with our capital reserves, anytime you want to get money out of the capital reserve, you need voter approval. So that proposition was essentially changing scope and allowing access to that reserve.
So, I mean, one, I think, obvious question is, when I look at the facilities, is it's not quick enough, we can't do anything about that. So what do you do for the next 2-ish years?
That's why we have to invest some money in the existing track and of course, anyway.
So you just basically the minimal amount to keep them serviceable, safe, et cetera.
Yeah.
From a resurfacing standpoint for around 2 years.
Yep.
I assume that's what the answer would be. Yeah, it's definitely, I sent you pictures of the video, by the way, so you have it for the pictures. But yeah, it's something else. It's a challenge. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And I know there's probably somebody who's gonna say, well, you're spending on sports and fields and all this kind of stuff, but I think creating the campus, there's a lot of safety and security that goes into what that means and what that looks like, and will really drive, a lot of positive. There should be a lot of positives in that way, driven by this kind of plan. It creates a much better feel in that way. I think that helps. I think we also suffer, I'm saying something that probably everyone knows, but this also suffers from the same thing the building suffered with, which was not having this continual fix of utilities when they're up and waiting, having this big, same thing, athletic fields, having to do one major versus, having a plan, a site master plan of sorts that allows us to make improvements is certainly something we need when this is behind us. Even in 30 years when neither of you are working.
I might be still on that.
Charlotte's gonna have two like 30-plus-year-old children at that. time. Holy cow.
Scary.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, it's a big project. However, it really, we have this disconnection from the stadium, that we feel every time we use it, whether it's a marching band event or a football game or a soccer game. There's this incredible disconnection between the stadium and the school. And, I really like the design. I think it's encompassing, the lighting, the safety. It really does create the campus feel, so.
That's the idea. Any other thoughts?
Great.
Great, certainly more to come.
Thank you. All right, we'll plug right along here. So the next item is discussion items, student Board of Education membership. I'm not sure how much we want.
I think this topic got lost as we transitioned leadership at the high school. So I just want to put it back on your radar to say,
Yeah.
to allow opportunity for, high school leadership to really settle in and then help make that recommendation. Would you like me to work with, some staff to try to select and really, if I'm doing that, what's my solicitation look like and sound like, right?
Right.
I want to try to be really clear, and I'm not positive that we are there yet. And Deb sent some feedback on that from her experience with, what groups you're a part of,
It was the
There.
Shenango County Board
Shin
Association.
County Board
Yes.
Association.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
really want the board's input on that.
Well, I think that, as you indicated, I think that Mr. Rowe can maybe give us some input and, it could be put, students could have some input on how they would want to be represented or, there obviously is a limited role in interaction with the board and whatever, but I think the students need to want to do it, I guess, or it should not be just, hey, you're doing it this week and they have to come here. There should be an interest in being involved as well. And I would love to have, some staff input or some guidance on how they feel that high school students, would be interested. Can't talk to them, so.
So that I'm clear, the number one role that you want this person to play is offer student perspective to the Board of Education.
Well, I think we need to back up a minute and discuss what kind of involvement the student wants, like, I've been wanting this for the last 5 years. We had a student for a short time. But I think that as a board, we need to, is the student's role to inform the board of what's going on from their perspective? Is it a student school board? I Googled stuff, took a bunch of notes. If the student is over 18, are they elected by the community? Can they vote? That's a whole other can of worms, but a lot of states have explored that, and then just legal stuff too. But I think we just need to go back and decide what kind of involvement do they need. And I also feel like we should have a student, and I copied this from an article, but they need to represent families that traditionally are left on the table. I don't, maybe not the most popular kid would be elected, maybe it would be someone else. I would love to see that.
I guess that's,
Yeah.
right, when you use the word elected, right, there's a process that supports election.
Right, now I was just reading about how some states are exploring how to get they have to be a voting age, so a lot of students. Yeah,
You can still, because I had that down too, that maybe we hold, that the students hold an election.
right,
Much the same way as they do for prom king or prom queen or student government. Yeah, put it out there, who's interested? They go on a ballot, the students vote, those votes are tabulated, they become a school board representative, student representative to the school board. I was also thinking that we could do something in conjunction with the regular school board voting calendar. what we're voting for budget. It would also educate, I think it was you that said last year you had one student vote there like for the capital project. We've got more than one student in the school that's 18, so again, I remember as a youth, going through an education process of voting, what it's like to vote. Again, this would be another opportunity for that education, while actually doing something to hopefully give the school, the students a voice as well at the table. So, yeah, I feel the same way that maybe in an election by the student body of a student, we could put out a list of what a qualified candidate would look for this. And so some kids are automatically going to be out of the pool because first and foremost, you have to be committed to it, right? Just like we are. Unless there's an emergency, we're here. So that means if you're a basketball player, your games are during our school board time, right? This might not be for you, right? So, if we put those things out there, I think we could get a nice pool of candidates. And of course, with our building leadership, they know who their students are. They could represent well and maybe represent somebody who wouldn't normally have a voice at the table and encourage them to get involved in something like this.
Actually have I don't disagree with lots of what you said. I have a slightly different opinion on the election side of things. I actually think that would be detrimental to finding the best person because any high school election always ends up being with a similar groups of people get elected. That's the way it typically goes.
As is the school board or other.
Well, it can be for sure.
Separately,
I mean,
it's always the same.
you hope it's a little different on the school board, but I kind of like, this is maybe too arduous, but an idea where someone has to submit in. You want to be on the school, you want to be the elected member on the school board from the student body. Maybe it's an essay that Mr. Rowe and Mr. Ryan review and say, maybe it's an interview, maybe it's something like that. I love the idea. I do love the idea, Brian, of tying in the May election cycle and a junior to be a senior maybe does something like that. It's a phenomenal thing on their college application process. But maybe they go through an interview, maybe they go through an essay, maybe it's one or the other or both. And then they can be selected based off of that by people who, that way we get rid of the idea that the school, the class president's going to always be it, or the valedictorian is going to always be it. It might give a chance for somebody who wouldn't otherwise have it.
Right.
Well, we could say too, I mean, we can put parameters out there. You can't hold another office within the school.
Could do that as well.
And, there's things.
I think you guys know better.
I think even like you're saying, an interview panel, it's a great idea too.
So
Can I just ask some questions?
yeah,
Do you
please.
mind?
No, go ahead.
What's your goal?
Well, that's what I was trying to get at, is what involvement would we want a student? We haven't had an opportunity to discuss that yet.
Okay, I think there's a couple things that come to my mind, right? Like, what's your goal? How are they gonna get appointed? What's that person's role here going to be? And how are they gonna disseminate that information that they get here out to their student body?
Right,
Right, and that's maybe not a function of here.
Yeah.
That's more a function of here, but just some things that pop into my head as we're talking.
yeah, I wouldn't want a student sitting at the table here with just a glassy eyed look on their face. I want.
Well, and I don't want them also to have a feeling that they're here to just listen
Right,
and not play
they need to play a
just
role.
like a body in a room, right?
Majority of the policies we enact affect students, so they should have a voice.
So here's what I would say, Brian. You said you want to come at a different approach. I like your idea. I'm gonna raise one, right? And I think that you guys have to get crystal clear on this. And that solicitation has to come from you in the form of video. And that's how we create some awareness around that need.
How about some social media talking points?
Love it, right? So
I don't do
I
it.
think it has to come from you, right? Instead of, Jake or I having to go select a couple students or determining whether or not it fits a certain, criterion that you have. I think you gotta get really clear on what that profile looks like, right? And what you're really looking for in terms of that student empowerment. I love that concept of student empowerment more than anything, right? But I think that solicitation has to come from me, my personal.
Back in November, this was a topic of conversation at the Shango County Board Association meeting. I just bring this up because we talked about that There were two schools there that said they do have a student rep. One was Green and one was Bainbridge Guilford. The Green representative said, and this is what they do in their district, not that it's the correct way. The superintendent selects the student, no application is used. The superintendent does speak with the counselors, they speak with teachers to find out, how qualified the student may be, not sitting there with a glassy eyed look, but maybe participating and becoming involved. They choose a senior. They don't have any voting. They find that it becomes a popularity contest sometimes. Obviously, no executive meeting participation, but the student is responsible for giving reports to the board on student feedback. What are the students' needs, or what are they feeling that they want to see possibly happen? So those are the types of things that are reported to the board by the student. Again, this was just, and Green has had success with that, but I really like the idea of maybe an application process and a panel and some type of an essay or an interview. But yeah, so that's what I learned from the Green District. Way.
And I would just add, because I've been involved with districts that have had student representatives, and I think the point is to the goal, right? Once you really get rock solid on the goal, from that will drive the process, right? So, right, whether it's really informing the board, right, about what's going on, that's one type of process, right? If it's empowering students, that's another type. But very often, I think the experience has been empowering for a student, right? They come, I don't know that they've given a lot of useful input to the board. I don't know that, their experience then translates back, to the student body. So I think the goal has to drive that process, right? Once you have the goals, you'll know what type of student you want sitting there, and then it'll be clear as to how you're gonna have to.
I think what you're really talking about, Ralph, is structure, right?
Yeah.
What's the structure that supports, ensuring that you're representing the voice of the student body, not just your personal agenda. And then, right, how do you communicate that effectively to you guys? So that's that piece I think that needs some clarity on. So I don't know how to get there for you, right, to that piece of clarity.
We got it. We can take it.
It is something that you could think about running through. Somehow including participation in government classes.
I can think of
Yeah.
existing structures where it makes sense. But then I hear like you guys want to walk away from potentially, existing cabinet members or student government members, that kind of stuff. Well, those are the structures that are intended for exactly what you're looking for, right? So to do something outside of that, there is no structure that supports that right now.
Here's something interesting. Washington actually has lowered the voting age for school board elections to 14. They don't, well, not necessarily installing.
That sounds like an awful
Boards would give them,
Okay,
they can't, give them a concentrated in education
Okay.
policy.
I think that. I'm really struggling with this, okay? I'm really not reaching the intention of why the student will be here, other than it's just an activity for the student to be here. And like you said, it's one student is empowered. And very rarely, I can imagine what happens here gets back to the student body. So we really need to nail down what the intention of it is. Like if there's an issue, if there's a problem, we usually hear about it. So I'm just wondering, we have to really nail down the process through which that student who sits at the table with us, which I'm completely happy with, that would be phenomenal to see more students in the seats or at the table. But how is that student receiving the input from the student body, number one? Number two, how do they interact in our meetings? Because and then how does that flow backwards to the student body? That's a big process, and I'm really struggling with how that works.
I think part of it came about when, some of us started hearing the valedictorian and salutatorian speeches and realized that some of the things they talked about were truly easy fixes. And it almost kind of caught us off guard in certain instances, as far as, well, geez, we kind of thought that stuff was happening, but if you don't know about it,
Right.
then we're not doing a good job of communicating it. So we had to communicate certain things better. There was one instance where we basically just needed to remove a couple of seats from the auditorium. It was done like the next day.
Right.
And so I think that's really when it came about, so that we weren't hearing it as these kids were going out of the school. And could have made even their experience a little better while they were here, if we had known prior. So I think that's when it started to get talked about, Chris. Really
Okay.
is.
Which is great, but. I've heard two years of those speeches, and they're pretty oriented to the individual's experience, right? And some of them are pretty general, but 95% of the things that come out in those are not board level responsibilities or responses, right? So maybe the reality is that we need a process through which students, and we experienced this when we went to Connecticut, there's got to be a process for students to be involved in building level interaction, right? Maybe that's the process. I don't know. I'm having a hard time understanding why, because it's always a popularity contest when it comes to elections at school. We all know that. My son ran for class president on, because he liked some sort of cereal, and he got elected, right? It's a popularity contest, and I get it, and it's silly, but that's what happens in high school. And I'm afraid that, we want, if it's empowering to one student and we want to do that, or we have several different students come in and they each have a different role, maybe they take a certain, maybe they're involved in the policy process, like we're reevaluating policies, understanding policy.
That line would probably be out the door, kids stay in line for that.
Yeah, right. But I'm saying, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm just struggling with.
Well, I think it depends. We could be very selfish and say it's one-way communication, right? We're all trying to find the really altruistic decision, like we want to be this two-way communication and empower everybody. We could be selfish to start off and say, we want one way. We need somebody, when dress code comes up, we need someone to point to and go, I don't know why we're even talking about it. We have no idea. Tell us your perspective on dress code. When it comes up for counseling services, for college preparatory, for a junior, we need somebody to say, what was your experience? Because we don't have any idea. It could be. Exactly. We could start off there, and it's simple, it's easy, it's one way. We're not asking them to share anything back. They might, but it could be one way, and we could see how it works. It's not the most empowering. It's not the most complete. It is selfish in that we're getting what we want out of it, but it's a place to start. I agree. We need to get solid on what our goal is. What does that mean? What does that look like? And we might come to the place where it says, we're not ready for this, or we might come to the place that says we're only ready for a baby step. Let's not try to, bite the elephant in one big chomp here.
Right. All right.
So safe to say that I'll wait to hear from you for next steps.
Yeah, I would say, and I would not, if the building principals have ideas or whatever, I'd love to hear them through Mr. Ryan or whatever. If something comes up when you leave here or whatever, or if you've experienced this in another place, please share that, because we're obviously struggling with how to make it work and how it's beneficial for both the student and for us as a board and for the district. So we don't want someone to just be obligated to come sit here and be bored out of their mind because we're going through consent items and action items and all that stuff. It needs to be useful for them and for us. So that's it. Anything else on that? Okay. All right, subcommittee updates, policy. Do we have anything to chat about that?
We do, sure do. We sure do. So we did talk about a couple of policies that are kind of going back to the drawing board before they get presented here. One of the policies, really, it was a question of the liability on the way the policy is written on a piece of property. And what's supposed to be done by the school district and what was committed to originally. What reality looks like now when it comes to maintaining that property, and things of that nature. So that one's going completely back to the drawing board, to look at it. Like Scott said during the policy meeting, you know, it's nice that people want to give us property, but it's not necessarily a good thing all the time.
It's really difficult to manage.
Yeah, so it's kind of become a thorn in the side. So that one's gonna be completely rewritten by the attorneys and presented back to us to limit liability. It's a potential liability the way things are written. We also talked about a couple of policies that we believe can be removed or condensed into other policies that are already in the books by adding a paragraph to the existing policy. But again, those aren't ready to be presented to us yet, so we'll come back to those ones in a future meeting, hopefully within a month or so. The policies that we do have to act on tonight that we did talk about, that you're probably not aware of yet, graduation policy. Well, what that's talking about is the credential diploma. It's adding verbiage for the credential diploma. As far as how they can participate in graduation. They're not required to, however, they have the option to if they so choose. There's no verbiage for that in there. That's just being added at this point. The rest of it will stay the same when it comes to regents and general diplomas. The programs for students with disabilities, again, we got a great policy out there. It's all in writing. However, when it was written, there must not have been a pre-K program, or the laws have changed since. We are putting in verbiage that speaks directly to the pre-K program now, when it comes to programs for students with disabilities. So we're adding in the pre-K covered. Right now it's K through 12. The last one is the code of conduct policy, and really just some verbiage changes in there for review of the policy by the board in regards to some dates, timeframes of when that should be done and how that should be done. Really removing the onus of the board as far as creating a code of conduct and really just making sure that our policy states that we're the reviewers of the code of conduct on an annual basis. We're hoping to have that done at the latest April on that one, because we need to review it in time for June, so that it can be put in place by September.
So it's improved at the
Reorg meeting, yep. Yep, because that's when we have to approve the code of conduct is at the reorg meeting, so.
Okay.
Did I miss anything? All right,
Okay.
By the way, he took no notes.
Yeah. Well, we talked about the capital, the building project, so. Finance or audit, I don't think we have anything to.
It's kind of capital driven as much as
Yeah.
the finance side.
Absolutely, so. Okay.
Yep.
Keep moving here. All right, I'll entertain a motion to accept all the consent items.
motion.
Moved by Brian.
Second.
Second by Brian Reed. Any discussion, questions? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So carried. All right, action items. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the following policies for first reading. A606 substitutes, A406 graduation, A303 programs for students with disabilities, and A402.1 code of conduct policy. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Brian Reed. Second by Deb Phelps. Any discussion or question?
I would ask the board to consider, and it's tough when we have 5 people, but to consider moving right through and approving first and second read on the substitutes. We've already approved that. All we're doing is increasing the rate of pay, daily rate of pay for those in an attempt to, incentivize some recruits.
I'll make a motion to fully approve and waive the second reading of board policy A606 substitutes.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? So we kind of have to back up because
Yeah.
we have two motions,
Right.
on.
There was already a.
All right, so the first motion, we would have to vote. Yeah,
We have to vote for the substitute first, right?
Right.
Because we're pushing all the way through, then we'll go, we can do the first reading for all the rest.
Yes, okay, so Brian Burton made a motion to fully approve and waive the second reading of board policy A606. And who seconded it? Roz, did you second it?
No, Deb.
Deb, did you second?
Oh, which one? This Brian or that?
That right.
Oh, I seconded this.
Okay, so seconded by Roz. All right, all those in favor of fully approving and waiving the second reading of A606. Aye. All right. So Brian Reed, you moved the first one, so
Yeah.
that would be A406, A303, and A402.1 for first reading.
Deb second.
And Deb seconded that. Any discussion on those three? All those in favor of
Aye.
first reading, aye. Any opposed? So carried, all right. It's recommended the Board of Education approve the attached board policy for second reading, A209 purchasing.
So move.
Moved by Brian Reed,
second.
second by Brian Burton. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the attached revised corrective action plan from the 2021 external audit.
So moved.
Moved by Brian Reed, second. Second by Deb Phelps. She raised her hand first. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
It's recommended the Board of Education approve the attached NICLAS registration resolution. Have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Brian Reed, second. By Deb Phelps. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So carried. All right, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the attached resolution awarding contracts for the Norwich City School District Capital Project Phase 1 site work and federal stimulus project. Moved by Brian Burton, second by Roz Durensis. Any questions or comments or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So carried. All right, I'll entertain a motion to accept the personnel recommendations.
Motion. Oh,
Okay, moved by Brian Burton,
Second.
second by Brian Reed.
I'm so sorry.
I know it's always confusing. This one.
Yeah.
Discussion.
Discussion.
Yes, so
The-
In the middle.
Yeah, just, we won't talk about people. We'll just make sure.
Okay, so what is happening with our special education teacher status in the middle school?
May I?
Yeah.
Okay,
No, hold on, hold on, hold on.
no.
Is this a question that we can,
We're advertising.
Yeah. I just have had people asking me with concern about a teacher not being in the classroom and what was the status of that, and I said I didn't really know what was happening.
Be happy to give you all kinds of background if you want, via email. Follow up.
Okay,
great, thank you.
so there's
Mr.
a position open then, right?
There is.
Okay,
You approved the resignation last week.
okay,
All right, any other questions or discussion?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, all those in favor of the personnel recommendations? Aye. Any opposed? So carried. Okay, any public comment? I don't think there is over there.
Thanks to all, thanks over there.
Thanks for approving my appointment.
You're welcome.
Well, that was on here.
Okay,
Can we go back?
Yeah.
all right, so, Anita, we are not going to, we're going to go into executive session, so I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel and legal matters. We will not take any action afterwards.
So, motion to go into the exec session.
All right, moved by Brian Reed, second by Brian Burton. All those in favor? Aye, so carried. All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Rich, maybe you can stick around?
For 1 minute,
We got-
just to